Okay, so we are making the jump from the object-oriented programming model exercises in the book to now implementing them here on the Pong code. And so I'm using Will's code here to just kind of talk about some of the challenges you might have. What did Will do? He added a paddle class, he added a ball class, but he didn't make any changes to his code, right? So he's just starting out, which is kind of where you guys should be at starting out, and that's a great place to start, is to create your paddle class and your ball class. And the idea here is that all of these variables that we're creating for the paddle, we are now going to place here into the init function of the class paddle, right? And we only need to do it once, because if you make a paddle and you put it inside of a paddle one variable, it's going to create all of those variables that you have specified and put it inside the paddle one variable. And then if we do a paddle two equal to a new paddle object, it's going to do that same thing and create all of those variables that we specified up in the init function and put it into the paddle two variable. So my point is that you don't need x1, y1, x2, y2 here in the paddle class. You just need it once. And the idea that you might want to keep in your mind is that the class paddle is a set of instructions for what variables to create when you make a paddle object, right? So it's just a blueprint for a ball. When I'm down here and I say like P1 is equal to capital paddle, right? What's it going to do? It's going to jump up here to the class paddle, look at the instructions in the init function, and create all of these variables. And the picture you want to have in your mind is, okay, I'm going to get a bag, call it P1, and I'm going to go up into the paddle class. I'm going to fill that bag up with all of these variables. All right. And then if I go ahead and come here and do P2 equals another paddle, then on this line of code, I'm getting another bag and call it P2. And I'm going to fill that second bag with these same variables. So that's kind of the idea that you want to have in your head. And, if you have that bag, then you can run these methods on them that you define in the paddle class to adjust the values of those variables or those instance variables. All right, we call this guy here an instance of paddle. Right, this is the class paddle, the blueprint. Right, here is an instance. Right, it's an actual object called paddle. Right, this is like a two-dimensional object. This guy's in 3 dimensions. He lives in the memory of the computer. Right, so he's like a 3-dimensional object. And then we're going to do the same thing with the ball, right? And we're going to create the ball. So I guess one thing to be clear on is that when we make a paddle, what is it doing? It's doing all of this. It's creating all these variables. So we don't need these variables anymore. We could, boom, delete it, because this line of code does all of that. And then when we do this for the second paddle, we can come here to the second paddle's variables and we can, boom, delete those, because this line here creates those variables for us. And one idea that I'm hoping you'll have instilled in your understanding after you finish this is that object-oriented program, a program following the object-oriented programming model executes the same instructions in the exact same order as code that is built sequentially, right? And when I say sequentially, Pong version 1 was built sequentially, right? We start here with this line of code and we work our way down. We have loops. There was no functions. There were no functions in the Pong version 1, right? There was just main. This is sequential, right? One instruction, then the next instruction, then the next instruction. Now that what we're doing to this code is we're implementing the object-oriented programming model and using classes and objects. But if you analyze it, version 1 and version 2, they execute the exact same lines of code in the exact same order, just using a different methodology. And the way I like to think about it is it's the same as sequential code and then using functions, right? What's happening in a program that's sequential, and then that same program using functions. It's the exact same code being executed in the exact same order, just the methodology is different. You're using functions to execute certain blocks of code instead of just doing it all in one main function. Same thing's happening here in the object-oriented programming model. So exemplified, right? We do this. What is that? That is doing these lines of code, right? We do line 46. What is that doing? That's doing these lines of code. We're creating a ball object right here. What's that doing? That's doing all of this, right? So same instructions, same order, different methodology. Now when we come on down, we have our game loop. We take in our keystrokes, nothing's going to change there. Everything stays the same. But right here, this stuff has to do with the paddle. If you notice, this conditional statement modifies the one paddle's position. This one limits one paddle's movement on the top and the bottom, sets the boundary, right? This one here sets the second paddle. This is the second paddle, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to move this code up into the update method of the paddle class. Okay, so this is going to go upstairs, and this is going to go upstairs right into the update method. So the only difference is that in these two pieces of code is that we're using y1 and y2, and we're using x1 and x2. But we don't need to worry about that, because when we call update right here, instead of doing this, we're gonna go paddle1 dot update, right? And what is that gonna do? That's gonna do this and do this, so I can erase those two blocks of code, right? But if you notice on this conditional statement here, we need move up and move down, right? So that's what we're gonna pass. We're gonna pass move up, and we're going to pass move down, right? Now let's go ahead and delete that. Delete this here, and delete this guy here, all right? So now we got to do it for the other paddle. So we're going to do paddle2 dot update. But paddle2 update, it does the exact same algorithm, except we need to give it move W and move S. So we're going to do that. Move underscore W, comma, move underscore S. Since we have that going, we could take all this code, and we could just, boom, delete it. It's gone. But why? Because the update method does that for us. So instead of doing it here in main, we're putting that code in update, and we're using the object to run that code. And that's great, because the object also has the bag of variables that are associated with the first paddle. P2 has the bag of variables that are associated with the second paddle, and we're running update using the keystrokes that should control the second paddle and should control the first paddle. We're going to do that same thing here with the ball. Alright, so all of this stuff is going to move up into the update method of the ball, and we're going to run ball.update right here. And that's about it, man. That's the structure of all of the games that we're going to be building. And if you look at any Pygame game that you've ever could find on the internet that people have built, that's the same structure it's going to hold to. How does it go? Imports at the top, global variables up at the top, our class definitions, right? Followed by the main. Inside of main, we have all the variables that we need for the basic running of our program, like display, screen, clock, right, play, anything like that. And then in between, we have the creation of our objects, right? So we're going to have create, paddle, create ball. Then we have our game loop, right? So here we have a while loop, reading keystrokes. Again, I'm describing the overall structure of every Pygame game out there, right? And there are a ton out there. Reading keystrokes. Run update on all your objects. Blit everything to the screen because everything was updated on all your objects. Blit them to their new position, clock tick, and flip. And that's it, right? That's all there is to it. So you need to follow that same structure as well. And I think that's about it. I hope that was clear. Good luck.